Toby, what do you know, and are you on a list?
Well, this investigation, the reason we know this is because Big Brother Watch have just published a report. They're a civil rights campaigning group, a report called the Ministry of Truth. And about 6 months ago, they contacted me and said, will you submit a subject access request to various Whitehall departments that have been working with a number of shadowy agencies, often staffed by former members of the security services, of which the 77th Brigade is one. There are about half a dozen. Will you submit subject access requests to see if your activities, your social media posts, have been monitored by any of these agencies? Because we think that many people, including journalists, are being monitored by them. And so I thought, yeah, that's pretty unlikely. I'm not an enemy of the state. Why would they be monitoring me? They can't surely just be monitoring people who are critical of government policy. That would be an inappropriate use of these, security agencies. But it turned out they were monitoring me, not just me, but Julia Hartley-Brewer, Peter Hitchens, Carl Hennigan, the Oxford Professor.
That's a stellar list, isn't it?
Evidence-based medicine.
I'm slightly jealous not to be on the list.
Well, you might be. I mean, if you'd submit, you can still submit a subject access request to, say, DCMS and discover whether, in fact, they were monitoring you along with the rest of us. If you, I mean, you were quite a prominent lockdown critic yourself, critic of masking. You might well have been monitored.
Why does this matter? Isn't it the job of the authorities to keep an eye on misinformation, and won't they gather up a few innocent people along the way?
Well, I mean, I think the way in which government ministers rationalised this use of these agencies to essentially monitor the activities of their critics. And by monitor, I mean look at stuff in the public domain, their journalism, their social media activity, not tap their phones or look at their WhatsApp messages. But I think the reason they rationalise that to themselves by saying they're not just critics of government policy, they are critics of what's in the best interests of British society. And if they say that masks don't work, or that we should hesitate before taking the mRNA vaccines, or if they say that more people will be harmed than lockdowns, than saved, then that's misinformation or disinformation. They came up with this category, which was mis/disinformation. So even though it obviously wasn't straightforward disinformation, people like me weren't foreign actors trying to undermine electoral contests for to advance my country's interests. But by merging these two categories, they decided that if you criticised the government's pandemic response, you were trafficking in misinformation, and that meant you were guilty of mis/disinformation, and that meant it was perfectly appropriate for these agencies to monitor you and pass on to officials and government ministers what you were getting up to. But the really sinister thing, Mark, isn't that they were merely monitoring people like me and Julia Hartley-Brewer and Peter Hitchens and Carl Hennigan and others. They were also monitoring members of their own party, so David Davis, for instance, pretty shocking, prominent former Home Secretary. But after, what these agencies would do is they'd monitor people's social media activity in particular, and if they thought that you'd posted something that breached the terms of service of Facebook or Twitter, they would point that out to their masters in these government departments, and the ministers or their intermediaries would then use their trusted flagger status to contact Facebook and Twitter and point out that this particular post had breached their terms of service. Hint, hint, ban this person or shadow ban this person or suspend them.
Would you really go that far? Because certainly in the States there's growing evidence from the Twitter files that the Biden administration picked on individuals like the journalist Alex Berenson, who was calling out vaccine risks, and he was a lockdown skeptic. And the White House effectively said, can you sort this man out? Can you do a job on him? And Twitter suspended his account permanently. You don't think that the British authorities have gone that far, do you?
I'm pretty confident that that is exactly what they've been doing. And this Big Brother Watch report, the Ministry of Truth, is really the British version
of the Twitter files. So you think through the military, through the army, that the government have effectively been cancelling people online? That's your allegation?
Not just the 77th Brigade, but some of these other shadowy organisations like the Counter-Disinformation Unit in DCMS. Yes.
So therefore, Number 10 has been no better than the White House in the course of this pandemic, is your contention?
I don't doubt that with these reports in hand, in which some people were flagged as having posted stuff breaching the terms of service of social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, officials within these departments then use their trusted flagger status to contact executives at these social media companies and point this out. I don't think they demanded that they take down this particular person's account or shadow ban them, but they pointed it out, and if it's a government official pointing it out, in all likelihood, Twitter and Facebook responded, as they did in the United States when they were contacted by officials of the Biden administration. So, and in the case, my subject access request, it revealed a report to the Counter-Disinformation Unit at DCMS in which it said that I tweeted something about an anti-vaccine mandate petition, a vaccine passport petition in France receiving 1.2 million signatures. And it got a lot of traffic on Twitter. And they flagged this up and they said, we don't think you should flag this one to Twitter because there are freedom of speech implications. In other words, don't try and get this guy banned because he set up the Free Speech Union. He's a reasonably well-known journalist, might backfire. But for people without my status, without my profile, who haven't set up pro-free speech organisations, the implication was, go ahead, they're fair game. Get them banned.
Yes, and that's actually the misunderstanding or the mischaracterisation of cancel culture. People say there's no cancel culture. Ricky Gervais is still on stage. But actually, it's the people that don't have the big platform who get cancelled or who self-censor.